Hello, readers. For this lesson, you need to have two really important things. The first is either a book club book, or if you're in a short story club already, use that short story. If you don't know what I'm talking about, ignore it. But you need to have a book or a text in front of you that you've already read before, something that you're familiar with. And then you need to have your reader's notebook. You'll be using this really quickly. You might even open up to a page for today's lesson so that you're ready to go. Okay, so I was thinking about yesterday's read aloud, and I was thinking about those window moments and what that starts to look like in our everyday lives. Now that I've lived, for a while, when I think back on my childhood, I mostly remember these big events, like these big moments, like trips had, or like achievements I've made, or failures. But then there's also these smaller moments that really stand out to me, that really make people in my life um, feel especially significant and even complicated. Let me tell you a story to help put this in perspective. When I was a kid, I always thought of my dad as being this really strong, like unbreakable guy. He's, in general, a tall, strong person with a very deep voice. And he definitely could like take on anybody. He's huge. And he also just like was consistently reliable. He never really got like very emotional. He did find things very funny, but he never was like uncontrollably laughing. He was pretty consistent in the way that he existed in the world. And he was the person too that I just thought could solve anything. Like nothing could ever phase him. Then I remember one day I came home from school and I was playing with my siblings, and the phone rang, and my dad answered it. And then all of a sudden, I remember looking out the corner of my eye and seeing him just look so different to me all of a sudden. His body language like changed. He usually like stood up really proud, but then all of a sudden he like was slumped over. He actually grabbed a chair and sat down and then put his hand in his face, or his head in his hands. And I remember going over to him, and he wasn't speaking by the time I got to him. And when he looked up at me, he had tears in his eyes and didn't say anything. And then he started sobbing. I had never seen anything like it in my entire life. I was absolutely shocked. And the reason for this, I learned in a few moments, was that he had just learned that his brother had died. And so, in a matter of moments, seconds really, my entire perspective on my dad shifted. This person that I once thought of as being just unbreakable, unshakable, stoic, serious, was a pile of tears. And I realized in that moment that he has the capacity to feel very deeply. And from that moment on, I've always known that my dad does have a sensitive side. It might not come out very often, but he does have one. It's there. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is because it is the way that we need to approach the characters in our books and our texts. As we get to know them and get deeper into the text, we might start to think that we know them really well. We might start to think like, we know all about how they're complicated, how they navigate the world, their relationships. But it's also important to stop and linger over some moments that maybe they act a little bit different and see what we can learn from them. So, today, what I want to teach you is that in life and in books, the smallest moments are the ones in which characters are revealed. It's important to look past the big dramatic events to easily that are easily, overlooked, and look into instead the smaller moments, because sometimes those moments can lead you to an even deeper understanding of a character. So I'll show you how I might do this with our read aloud text by Matt de la Pena. Let's get started. Sometimes to do this work that we're doing today, it is important to just remind yourself of those big events that have happened in the story. So that way you can kind of push past them and get right back into the story by looking at the smaller tiny details. So just take a second right now to maybe look across my graphic, or just think to yourself about the big events that have happened to our narrator so far. Now that you have that in your head, I want to go back to a smaller moment that I think is a little bit more revealing about the character than I realized at first. So I'm going to take you to page 3. Um, And this is where we hear about the narrator's preparations to go to Mooney Gym for the first time. So as I read this, I'm going to be trying to consider maybe what I didn't notice before, maybe looking at word choice or even just new details that stand out to me. Here I go. Proceed instead to the local library and look up Mooney Gym online. Type the address into Google Earth and you'll discover it's right next to the Air and Space Museum your moms took you and your sis to back in the day. And the Air and Space Museum, if your calculations are correct, isn't but 5 miles from your pop's job at the factory. I'm noticing that at the library, when he finds the location of the gym, he goes to Google Earth. And that's something that's very smart, and I would even call that maybe resourceful, something I did not know or realize about him before. And also, just the fact that he's at the library doing this kind of thing, like that's something that he does. I feel like I overlooked at first. I just always pictured him on a basketball court or at a gym. And he's seems to be in some sort of habit where like going to the library to look something up is normal. So I would maybe call him maybe resourceful, but also like a little bit brainy, smart. And he also, to remember this particular museum and exactly where it is, he must have kind of liked it, or that at least that experience from his life between his mom and his sister was important. And those are people I really haven't heard about in the story. So do you see how at first what I'm doing here, let me just back up. What I'm doing here is I just took a moment to consider a smaller moment that maybe I had overlooked before. And then I reread and I tried to pay attention to word choice or maybe just details that seemed new to me. I thought about what stood out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use all that work I just did in my head to start to analyze it maybe on paper. What does this line or this part show me about the character? Okay, so now here we go into our reader's notebooks. So you might set your reader's notebook up the way that I set mine up to do this work by making a friendly T-chart. I always like to put mine horizontal. So I'm going to start by just putting down maybe not the whole quote, but a little bit of the quote that felt really important. Like, for instance, I might just put down like proceed. And by the way, I have the text like right here by my side. Proceed to instead the local library. Mooney Gym online. That just like there, I feel like already gave me some insight if I'm thinking about like what this shows me about the character that I didn't realize before is the fact that he seems to be in the habit of going to the library when he wants to know something. And maybe I'll give him that trait, like resourceful is a person who knows how to use their resources well. He is resourceful and I also think one of the other details, as I said before too, I'm just gonna put down like that it's right next to the Air and Space Museum. Notice, by the way, how I'm making another entry. I'm like really breaking apart this detail. Even though I read this all together, there's actually like two bits here that really stood out. It's the fact that he is a resourceful person, and then also the fact that he seems to be brainy and like really smart, that he's able to figure this stuff out or remember exactly where it is. He says, like, if your calculations Oh, correct. I'm not even gonna do the full quote because it's really just about the fact that like he's very smart, remembers a lot, and even just the fact that like he remembers a lot, the fact that he is with like his took your mom's took you and your sis. Another thing is like he remembers this maybe because we haven't learned about his mom and his sister very much, but maybe they're really important to him. Maybe he enjoys spending time with them. He remembers something they did together. I could even maybe make a prediction like they mean a lot to him. Okay. Wow. Do you see how much I just got out of like one tiny bit? So, what I'd like you to do is the same kind of work. I'd like you to analyze smaller moments to get even more insight into the characters and the stories that you're reading. Start by considering smaller moments that you maybe overlooked. So that could mean that you go back and you spend some time not rereading a lot, but rereading enough just to get a sense. Or you could read onward and do this kind of work too, where you just pay a little bit more attention to word choice and new details. But then as you go, is what I really want you to try to do is stop when something stands out that could show you something different and ask yourself, what does this line show about the character? And a really helpful tool, if this feels challenging or you're not really sure what to write for the insight, you could use this, which is also posted on our Padlet and probably alongside this video. There are some key things that typically come up when you're thinking about new insights about characters. You could try any of these. For instance, if I'm just looking at this chart, I definitely feel like the character, in a sense, is acting in maybe a surprising way, going to the library to look something up. Okay, I hope that this helps you to get started on some of the work that you could be doing right now in your reader's notebook with the text that you've read already. Again, it could be a short story, it could be a book, but it's something that you've read before. I can't wait to see what you come up with, and I'll check in with you soon.